Hello, welcome back to Fleet Signal. My name is Alex, and today I'm going to take a look at the rules for Firestorm Taskforce. So, let's begin. Okay, so this is going to be a general flick through and some general impressions of the rules for Firestorm Taskforce. Bear in mind that I haven't played a game of Firestorm Taskforce at this point, so this isn't going to be a comprehensive how to play Taskforce video. This is just going to be general impressions and to show you what the rules look like. So first things first, you can download this from this image as a wallpaper from the Spartan Games website if you really want to. And moving on, we have some table of contents here and some credits for the game, including some community members such as Dan Bird and Giles Pritchard, who have been given a nod in the book, which is nice. And then, what is Firestorm Taskforce? What is this game? What is this galaxy that you're fighting in? Gives you a little bit of blurb here about what that's all about. And there's also a few paragraphs here on organized play, which is great to see. I'm a huge proponent of organized play in tabletop games, in any kind of game really, because I firmly believe that organized play drives the game forward, pushes the game forward. Tournaments are gatherings of people, basically. So yep, good to see some acknowledgement about organized play in the rulebook. And moving on, we have game basics. What do you need to play Firestorm Taskforce? Well, it's much like any other war game. You need a table, a body to play against, some models, some markers, dice, usual wargaming stuff. Has some bits here about models and basing, measuring, and pre-measuring. You can pre-measure anytime, just like Firestorm Armada. The battlefield, the graveyard, which is actually a mechanism that this game shares with Halo Fleet Battles, in that SRS tokens, short-range spacecraft tokens, can go into the graveyard, and then they can be brought back in the next turn, so they can fight again. Here we have game markers. There are only 4 markers in this game. In the unboxing that I did for the Aquilin vs Directorate set, I said that there were about 8 markers. I thought there were about 8 markers, but there are actually only 4 markers in this game. And here it shows you bombers and interceptors. So how those work, they're on tokens, they have micro dice, and so on. Oh, and by the way, the markers themselves are activation, damage, disorder, and obscured. Next, we go on to how the dice work. So if you play Planetfall, this will be immediately familiar to you. There's basic, heavy, and exploding dice. Basic dice, so when you roll a d6, if you get a 6, that counts as 1 success. With heavy dice, 6s count as 2 successes with no reroll. And exploding dice count as 2 successes, and you roll an additional dice to see if you get any more. In the game, you always round down, just like Firestorm Armada. If you have any fractions, you round down. And it tells you about measuring to and from models, ranges, arcs, line of sight, that kind of thing. And also alternating activations. I move a squadron, you move a squadron, I move a squadron, and so on. And opposed tactics test, which is another term from Planetfall. Basically, grab a number of d6, roll, add your fleet tactics bonus for your faction that you're playing, and see what happens. Basically initiative rolls and things like that. Okay, next we have the anatomy of a stat card. So a lot of these stats will be familiar to Armada players. You have movement, damage rating, hit points, crew points, point defense, and shields. And a nice touch here, which is also mentioned further on in the rules, is that you might see some weapons that are noted in red text and some that are noted in blue text. And there are some defenses that also have red and blue text. So red weapons are defended with red defenses, blue weapons are defended with blue defenses, which is a nice touch. It aids understanding, and it's something I'd like to see in Firestorm Armada if possible. It might be a bit more complicated to implement into Armada, but it's something I'd like to see there. We also have the number of points per ship. That isn't the number of points per squadron, it's the number of points per ship. And just some general information about the ship. How big can the squadron be, what kind of ship is it? And also you've got the Mars, the model assigned rules as well for that particular ship. Now we move on to how to build a fleet. It looks like Planetfall, but it actually works more like Armada. So let me explain what that actually means. Okay, so here we have a task force battle group, and you'll see that there's a tier, well, there's a squadron in the middle, and there are squadrons around it, and there are also these black arrows as well. So the center squadron is your lead squadron, and it's mandatory to take that. So you have, in this case, you have to have a tier 1 squadron, and you also must have a tier 2 and a tier 3 squadron as well. And all this is actually listed on the side here as well, the number of different squadrons you can have. So in Firestorm Armada, you have to have a tier 1, a tier 2 and a tier 3 squadron before your fleet is actually legal, and then you add more squadrons depending on the number of points you have left. And in this game, it pretty much works the same way. You have a tier 1, a tier 2 and a tier 3, and then you can add more of them onto, into that fleet. It's just that in Task Force, you have these battle groups. So you can only have 2 tier 1s in a battle group, and then you have to make another battle group. For example, there are no special rules for the Task Force battle group, but there are special rules for the Recon battle group. So in a Recon battle group, you have to have a tier 2 as your lead squadron, and a tier 3 bolted onto that, and then you can have an additional tier 2 or a tier 3 squadron. And the special rule is that basically Recon battle groups have to be deployed after all other battle groups have been deployed. So that's basically how fleet building works in this game. You make a number of battle groups that comprise your total fleet. Okay, in addition to Task Force and Recon battle groups, you can also have narrative battle groups as well, which is something that Spartan Games wants to upload to their website over time, probably going to. Things like legendary formations, special operation groups, planetary defense, those kinds of things, and they're going to have their own structure and their own special rules as well. So that's how you build a fleet. It tells you how to build a fleet in Task Force. Next we have how to use terrain. So what kind of terrain can you shoot through? How do you move through certain types of terrain? Do they block on the side or not? That kind of thing. And then we have the sequence of play. So how do you set up a game? And then the actual basic sequence of play, basically a game turn. So first you determine initiative, and then you have the activation phase. Activate squadrons one after the other, alternating between players. And then after that you have the end phase, go on to the next game turn. So it's all displayed there as a kind of a quick reference on one page, which is nice. Next we have how to move models. This section on overlapping also applies to Firestorm Armada. Basically ships cannot touch each other, bases cannot touch each other. In this game there's no proximity vectoring if you're coming from Armada. So instead of being able to move models like to one side in order so they can fit next to each other, you have to actually move the model back to where it started from and then try to move it again, making sure that neither the models or the bases touch. Then there's bits and pieces about zero movement models, coherency, which is always 6 inches, and also turning in this game is a bit different. It's actually the same as Halo Fleet Battles in that small models can turn at the beginning and the end of their movement up to 45 degrees, and large and medium models can only turn at the end of their movement, again up to 45 degrees. So turning in movement has been simplified compared to Firestorm Armada. But yeah, if you've played Halo Fleet Battles, it's going to be pretty familiar to you. And movement is actually one of the things that, one of the biggest causes of why Armada games take a long time to play in general. So movement has been really simplified in this game. Next we have how to attack with models. So you nominate a target, you measure the range, line of sight. You can combine weapon attacks if all those ships share the same classification, such as laser, torpedo, etc., and the same MAR, same model assigned rule. If they don't have a MAR, if a weapon doesn't have a MAR, it can only combine if it has the same classification with a weapon of the same classification that also doesn't have a MAR. So yeah, combining non-weapon attacks for bombers, boarding assaults, interception defense, which is a cool little mechanic that we'll find out about in a second. And it also tells you about weapon triggers and defensive triggers as well. So same kind of thing, like red weapons are defended with red shields, and now they're actually defined. That's actually defined as a trigger in the game. It's not just I haven't done enough to do damage to that ship, ping. You know, it's actually, you know, when you do enough damage to which would damage a ship, that triggers a defensive roll. So that's actually defined now in the rules. And next we go on to the damage table, which looks complicated, but it's actually pretty easy to use. Basically what happens is you and your opponent, you know, roll attack, roll defense, and then you see how many hits, how many successes you manage to get. And if the DR, so for example in this case, this Akron ship has 7 DR. So say if I managed to roll 14 hits against this Akron ship, for example, then I would have doubled the DR. And it says here, if you equal or exceed the DR, then you roll 1d6 on the damage table. If the DR was doubled, you add +1 to that roll, you and your opponent. If the DR was tripled, you add +2, and if it's quadrupled, you add +3. So if I were to roll 14 in this example, that's doubled. So me and my opponent would roll a d6, add +1 to that roll, and then we see what happens on the damage table. So say I rolled a 4, my opponent rolls a 5. That will be 2x damage. Now that's 2 points of damage, not 2 times damage. So that will be 2 points of damage to the ship. If you and your opponent both roll a 7 or more, the target is always destroyed. And yeah, that's pretty much how you use the damage table. Spartan Games has also published a carnage damage table on their website in the Firestorm Taskforce download section. And that is basically a more deadly version of this damage table that's meant for tournaments and, well, casual play if you want to. So things die even faster than they do in Taskforce. So that's how the damage table works. Moving on, we've got boarding assaults. Similar sort of thing as attacking, really. You know, if I'm attacking, or if I want to board one of my opponent's ships, I would combine all the crew points and roll that. Get all the dice for the crew points, roll that. My opponent will get dice based on PD, point defense, and roll that for defense. And then we'd compare them, see what happens, and then you follow the table. So for example, if I roll double the number of hits that my opponent rolled, but not triple, then it will be a storming action, and we both roll 1d3 on the damage table, adding 1 to the results. So basically, roll CP, roll PD, see what happens, and then follow the table. That's how boarding assault works. Next we have using short range spacecraft, SRS. So bombers, interceptors and so on. Interceptors can actually defend a nearby model, even if that model isn't the parent model for that, for that ship. So, if a model next to a carrier, for example, is being attacked, then the carrier can scramble interceptors to that, to that friendly ship to help out, which is, nice little thing. And here we have the end phase. So check to see if someone's won. Carrier replenishment. That's basically when SRS tokens are used, either for interception or for attacking like bombers. They go to the graveyard, and then in the end phase you reassign them back to ships. So you do that in the end phase. Squadron reinforcement, which lets you basically combine two half-strength squadrons or whatever into one, stronger squadron. In Firestorm Armada, you have to use attack to do that, tactical action card to do that. In Task Force, it happens during the end phase because there are no attacks in Task Force. You and your opponent remove disorder markers if there are any. You don't just remove them. You have to bid on the number that you want to remove, and then you and your opponent reveal your bids at the same time. And however many markers you remove affects the number, affects your initiative for the next turn. And then prepare forces. So basically, make sure everything's cleaned up. Go on to the next turn. Here we have the model assigned rules, which are split up into different categories: weapons, protective, and general. As you can see, there are nowhere near as many Mars in this game as there are in Firestorm Armada, and thankfully they've been split up into sections. Next, we have playing a scenario, which is scenarios basically. Roll a d6 to see which scenario you're going to play if you can't decide, and then the actual scenarios themselves: border clash, escalating engagement, recover resources, which are all three of those are from Firestorm Armada. Then we have secret orders, which is new to Task Force. Capture Station, which is from Firestorm Armada, and Planetary Assault, which I believe is from System Wars, Firestorm System Wars, if I'm not mistaken. And then finally we have some examples of play. These are just basically examples that might happen during a game, just so you can familiarize yourself with how the rules kind of work in general. So just have a flick through them and see what happens. And that is the rules for Firestorm Taskforce. Okay, so yeah, that was a flick through the rules for Firestorm Taskforce. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you might want to pick up and start playing. Maybe this might be your first entry into the Firestorm Galaxy. Let me know if it's something that tempts you to delve into the Firestorm Galaxy. And if you already play Firestorm Armada, then also let me know if this is something that you might consider playing, as alongside playing Armada as well. And yeah, just leave a comment in general to let me know what you think of the rules. Yep, as always, be sure to subscribe and to share this video if you think someone else might like it. And if you're on social media, then Fleet Signal is on social media as well, in all the usual places. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya!